again, Wired fam. Hope everybody's doing well. Today is episode 8 in our Becoming a Better Angler series, and we're going to talk about live bait today, guys. So we're going to talk about how I approach live bait fishing, why live bait fishing still has its place in crappie fishing, and we're going to talk about how to rig, what to use to rig, how to get started live bait fishing for crappie. So stick with us. We'll be right back with you. It's going to be a good one. All right, guys, welcome back. So, brought it in off the lake. We're now in the shop, and I'm gonna go over exactly how I set up to live bait fish, okay? So, again, fishing with live bait is the simplest, easiest way to catch crappie, hands down, without a doubt. You don't have to learn to work a jig. You don't have to, learn those methods, if you will. Like we talked about in earlier episodes, the reel pause or the steady slow reel. You can kind of work into those methods, but through live bait, okay? So live bait is a little bit more of a hassle. That's why you guys don't see me do it a whole lot, because one, you got to keep minnows alive. Two, you've got to go to the store and pick up minnows before you go to the lake, and it's easier for me just to go to the lake without having to go find the bait at the bait shop, get it, put it in a boat, blah, 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 blah. Transport it around, keep it alive. But it is a great way, and there's a lot of people that really love to live bait fish. I love to live bait fish. My kids love to live bait fish. It's a lot of fun watching that float go down. So let me show you guys how I rig or how I set up to fish for live bait. And I'm also going to show you guys what live bait cooler that I use that I found the best. I've used just about everything. There's nothing that beats the good old styrofoam minnow bucket. That's hands down. The good old white styrofoam minnow bucket with a little aerator dropped in that joker, it'll do you just fine. But I do have a live bait cooler, and I'll show you guys that here in a little bit, the one that I use. And I'll tell you why I use it mostly. So we'll get to that in a little bit. But let's talk about setup, okay? First and foremost, let's talk about rod, reel, line setup to live bait fish, okay? I have two different kinds of live bait setups, okay? Let's talk about the first one. The first one is a slip float setup. You guys have seen it. Everybody knows, that's been in the crappie fishing industry long enough, or in the world long enough, knows that slip floating is an easy way to change your depth, to move around, to be versatile, but it can be cantankerous, and it can be a pain in the butt too at times, because a lot of times your line won't slip through the float if you don't get the right float, or that dreaded line stop, that bobber stop gets caught in your eyes, kind of a pain in the butt, sometimes. Now, let's talk about, first of all, rod and reel for slip floating, okay? 8-foot ACC crappie stick is what I like to use. That is a medium fast action 8-foot ACC crappie stick. I like a cork handle. I also like their super grip handle, but I do like I'm an old school cork guy, right? I do like the cork handle. And then line, let's talk about line. Reel really isn't that much. Your standard 1000 or 1500 reel, that's a Mr. Crappie reel that's on there. That's kind of an older reel of mine. I like the Fluger Try-On size 25. That's kind of the 1500 size. But 1000 to 1500 size on the reel is what you're looking for, okay? 6-pound high-vis mono is what I slip float with, okay? 6-pound high-vis mono is what I like to slip float with. Very simple setup, guys. I probably set up a lot simpler than most. Let's talk about how I go about setting up that slip float rig, okay? So the slip float rig that I use is very simple. Again, I like the string type bobber stops. I do not prefer the, as you guys have seen probably all over the place, this is the you know, little rubber bobber stop. I do not prefer those. I prefer the line setup, okay? And I'll tell you why. Because that little rubber bobber stop gets hung up in the eye of your rod. It gets hung up in your spool. Your line will get hung around it in the spool if you're fishing deep. Plus, you know, if you're fishing against an 8-foot rod. So if you're fishing deeper than 16 foot with it, it gets down into the spool on the reel, and it really gets hard to deal with. So I don't prefer the rubber. I prefer the string type. And the way that I set this up, okay guys, let's talk about that, is first and foremost, you need your bobber stop, right? So your bobber stop goes first, okay? So you get your little bobber stop out, okay? It's got a little plastic cylinder in the center of it. That little plastic cylinder is what you put your line through, okay? So you put your line through there, slide that joker on there just like that, okay? We'll forget that for just a second. We'll come back to it. We'll tighten it all down in just a minute. But let's talk about bead, okay? Bead doesn't really make much difference, guys. Any kind of bead that won't allow, as long as the bobber stop you're using does not slide through it, okay? You want this bead to stop at the bobber stop. So little bead, and I like to try to get a bead with a big enough hole in it that it'll slide on the line freely, okay? But it's not going to go through the bobber stop. So little chartreuse bead on there, just like that. Okay, so we got our bobber stop, then we got the bead, then we're going to go with the float. So what kind of float do we like? Well, I had a fill float that I really liked, but they discontinued it. So I have actually switched over to the Rod and Bob's 3-in-1. Okay guys, it's a 3-in-1 float. You can use it in a fixed position or a slip float position. To use that in the slip float position, there's a little slit. I don't know if you guys can see that or not, but there's a little slit right in the end of it. And you just simply put your line right through that little slit below the spring, okay? So it goes on there just like that. Hangs on there just like that. That's the Rod and Bob's 3-in-1, okay? That's an 1/8 ounce size, all right? 1/8 ounce size on my float, partnered with a number 5 split shot. That is a number 5, guys, size 5, okay? Split shot is what I use. So I take my size 5 split shot. I like to come up about 2 feet, okay? About 2 feet up to start with. That joker on there just like that, okay? Now, let's recap. We got bobber stop, bead, slip float, and split shot, okay? Then we're gonna come down here. What hook do I use? Well, very simple. For live bait, I like a number 2 gold Aberdeen hook, guys. Number 2 gold Aberdeen hook. It's that simple. All right. I tie that with, when I'm slip float fishing, I tie that with a fisherman's knot. Some people call it a clinch knot. All right. So take the line, put it through the hook, double it back over. Okay. Wrap it around the main line 1, 2, 3, 4 times. Go through the loop at the eye of the hook, come back around through the loop that you just created, and cinch it down. Okay, but wet your line, cinch it down, okay? Bite off the tail end, you're good to go. There's your number 2 Aberdeen, gold Aberdeen hook right there. Some guys are gonna say, Matt, why don't you use a loop knot? Well, I'll tell you why. I don't use a loop knot when I'm live bait fishing, because when you're live bait fishing, you typically have slack in your line because you want your float to be able to act appropriately when the fish hits it. You want that float to raise up, or you want that float to go down, whatever it is that float is going to react to the strike of that fish, okay? When that happens, I do not want, because when I set that hook, I'm going to be catching up from slack line and setting the hook. So that's going to jerk pretty good on that hook. I don't want that loop knot in there bouncing where it could potentially fail, okay? So I like a good solid knot when I'm live bait fishing, okay? So then I want about 12 to 14 inches on my split shot from my hook, so I'll slide that down and pinch it tight, 12 to 14 inches, okay? Then there's my float, my bead, and my bobber stop. So let's talk about that bobber stop, okay? On that plastic little piece on the bobber stop that your line is on, you want to slide that plastic piece off, okay? Slide your string off that plastic piece. You can disregard that, get rid of it. Then you've got two little tail ends on your bobber stop. You just grab each one of those tail ends, you pull them tight, okay? And you can clip those off. I don't have scissors with me, they're in the front of the boat, but you can clip those off. Clip them off pretty close to the knot, and you're ready to go, okay guys? You can move that up and down your line depending on what depth you want, okay? So there's my slip float setup. It's pretty easy, all right? Bobber stop, again, string bobber stop, got my bead right here, got my float, okay? My 3-in-1 rod and bobs, my number 5 split shot, a gold Aberdeen hook. I'm done, I'm ready to go fishing. So take that to the lake, I'm ready to rock and roll, okay? So that's one way that I live bait fish, okay? The next way, go ahead and take this off here, all right? The next way that I like to fish, okay? Same exact rod, except for 2 foot longer. I like a 10-foot ACC crappie stick, okay? So a 10-foot ACC, all right? Why do you want a 10-footer? Well, this is going to be, we're gonna talk about a fixed float, okay? We're gonna talk about a fixed float. So, there's several different types of fixed floats that I use. I like a pencil type fixed float, which is very similar to these right here, okay? These came from Walmart, they're nothing special. So I like these, all right? Fixed floats can be set up to fish with a fixed depth, okay? Why do I like a pencil type float like that? Because it sticks up above the water. It gives me something, these eyes and these glasses, gives me something extra to see and watch for that strike. So I do like a pencil type float when I'm fixed float fishing, okay? When I'm fishing with live bait with a fixed float. A lot of times in the spring is when I do this because those fish are shallower. Why do you want that 10-foot rod again? Let me go back. I want that 10-foot rod so I can fish 8, 9, 10 foot deep and still cast with that fixed float, okay? So that additional 2 feet of rod allows me to leave a little, or to fish a little deeper and still cast that float in this setup, okay? So let me show you exactly how I set up with a fixed float. Another good float, let me grab one back here in the back. Another good float. You guys have probably seen these a lot. Everybody's seen them in the crappie industry. They're a crappie fishing staple, okay? Everybody has seen the orange round float, right? That is a really, really, really good float for a fixed float application, okay? Fixed float application, it's a great float. Love them, love them, love them. And let me show you how I set up the fixed floats. Very similar. It's actually the same, okay? Gold Aberdeen hook. All right, go right back with the number 2 gold Aberdeen. So again, you know, there we go. Number 2 gold Aberdeen hook. So kind of starting backwards here, we're starting with the gold Aberdeen hook. Go 3, 4 times, okay? Come on back around. Through your loop. That fisherman's knot. Or clinch knot, whichever one you call it. We'll go with that number 5 split shot again. Let's use the one off our last rig. People are going to yell at me for using my teeth, but that's okay. Go about 12 inches above your hook. Okay? So you got your hook, got your split shot, and then whatever depth you want to fish. Okay? You want to fish 6 feet? You know? You want to fish 4 feet? Let's do 3 feet since we're sitting down. About 3 feet up, right there. We'll grab our float. Now, when I use a round float, guys, I do not hook the bottom and the top of that float. What I do is I actually just push the bottom, okay? I put the line in there, and I will actually wrap it around and go through it twice, okay? So my line's through there 2 times, not one. All right, so there's one time. And then I'll actually take this line, wrap it around the second time, and that's got my float in a stationary position, okay? So I always wrap it twice, and the reason is so that it doesn't slip. That way, if I'm catching fish at 6 feet deep, my float doesn't move, and it keeps that minnow in the strike zone every cast. I don't want that to move, right? That's important, because if you're catching crappie at a certain depth, you need that float to stay put, all right? So there's my setup right there, okay, in a fixed float position, all right? What's gonna happen is, and the reason, let me tell you another reason that I do not attach my line to the top of that float, because when this float goes out, as you can see, it's laying sideways right now, right? When this float goes in the lake, it's gonna stand up straight like this. But if a crappie comes up and hits this from the bottom and picks the weight up off this float, being that the line's only on the bottom of the float, it's going to lay over sideways like this, okay? That's how I'm gonna know that I had a strike, because a lot of times crappie strike up, right? So you go from a standing position, such as this, okay, to a laying position. When that fish comes up, hits that minnow and comes up with it, it goes over to a laying position. So it allows that float to kind of give you that telltale sign of you just had a strike. If that float lays over sideways, you know something's up, okay? All right, bait coolers. Let's talk about bait coolers. So what bait cooler do I use for my live bait? Well, I use this is a 13 quart Fraybill bait cooler. And I'm gonna tell you the goods, I'm gonna tell you the positives and the negatives about this cooler, okay? So I will give you some negatives that I don't like, and I will tell you how I fixed them, okay? First and foremost, I do love the cooler, all right? I love the handle on the cooler. It's got a great handle on it. It's very well built. I love the latches. There's actually like a 2-stage latch on it. So obviously that's open, okay? And then that's stage 1. You guys hear that? It just kind of clicks down. It's not real firm. It's not held real tight. You can actually just take your pinky and flip it open, okay? But then there's also a second stage of that latch where, you heard that? It locks, okay? I mean completely locks. I can't open that with my pinky. I can push as hard as I want with my pinky. It ain't coming open, okay? You have to get in there and you have to hit that latch hard. It's nice to have that first stage to where, you know, if you're out in the boat, you're fishing, you got a lot of boat traffic, the boat's rocking, you can hit that first stage or just maybe hit one of them, and it keeps your cooler closed enough to where that gasket seals and you don't get a lot of water splashing around in your boat. And then if you need a minnow, it's just as simple as hitting that, flipping it open. You know, you're in your minnow, you're in your minnow bucket, okay? But when you get minnows from the bait shop and you're driving to the lake and you're putting this in your truck or you're putting this, you know, in the bottom of the boat, you don't want a bunch of water. You hit that second stage of that latch and it will not let this thing leak. It will not leak, okay? I mean, unless this thing turns over and it comes out of your hose hole right here, where your hose comes out, it is not gonna leak, okay guys? So I really, really like that 2-stage latch setup that they have. It's really, really nice. I do like the gasket that they have. They've got a good gasket in there that doesn't let this thing leak. And really, the inside of it is just a minnow bucket, guys. I mean, it's pretty straightforward, pretty simple. I mean, it's just your average, everyday minnow bucket. Now, it comes with one of those little nets that you can put in there, one of those little, that actually sits right here on this lip, and you know, it's got a little handle and you can pick the net up. You don't have to put your hand in the water. But I'm old school. I want to get my hand wet. If I'm gonna fish with minnows, I want to get my hand wet. Now, some of you guys are gonna be like, yeah, but I fish with minnows in December and January. It's colder than crap outside. Well, I get that. So they have that netting in there that you guys can put in there. Or you can get you a little minnow net. You can do it that way, whichever way you want to do it. But typically when I fish with minnows, it's with the boys and we're out there, it's warm weather. You know, I don't have to worry about getting my hands wet. Plus, my kid loves to play in the water with the minnows. He'll get the minnows out and play with them and name them and put them back in there. And then he runs a hook through them and catches fish with them. And I don't know, it doesn't make sense. But anyway, that's that's the positives of this cooler, okay? It's got great base on it. You know, it's got good feet on it. It's got a couple little rubber deals on the corners. So I've got 2 of them that have come off, it feels like, but these 2, it does have little rubber things on the corner that kind of keep it from sliding around. I mean, this thing's probably 6 years old, and it has held up great, okay? And I've used it a lot. So the latches have held up great, as you can tell. I mean, the latches are in great shape. You know, 6 years old, and a lot of minutes went through this thing. But the one thing that I do not like about this Frabill 13-quart cooler, and I'm going to tell on them, is I do not like the built-in aerator that they have, okay? There's a built-in aerator that comes with the cooler that lasted all of about a week, all right? And I was not very excited about it. They actually sent me another one. I got another one from them, and that one didn't last for a couple weeks, a couple trips, and I was very disappointed in it. So what I did is I just put a little bit of hose in there, a little longer hose. I went and got some hose from the fish store. Put a little longer hose in there, and I actually have an aerator. It's a power bubbles. I'm sure you guys have seen the 12-volt power bubbles. I actually have it in my boat that I put in my live well for my tournament fish. And I just put a splitter on it. So I've got 2 different lines coming from that power bubbles, and I plug in right here when I'm fishing with minnows. From my power bubbles that's mounted in my boat, so that runs on 12-volt power from the boat. So that's how I power. Just got a little piece of hose with the connector that plugs in right here, and I power it with my power bubbles, and it works great. It keeps my minnows alive. Actually, it works a lot better than the battery deal because I don't have to buy batteries. You know, this was battery powered, and you do have to put batteries in it. And like I said, it just is subpar in my opinion. You know, I tell you guys the truth about it. So I think they could do some upgrading on their aerator. And if you get one of these, don't feel bad if your aerator goes out, because it happens. I had 2 go on me. It does come with a strap, a carrying strap, a backpack strap that you can put right here. You can carry it on your shoulder. So there are a lot of good points to this cooler, and there are some negatives too. But all in all, it's worth it. I enjoy it. I don't have to worry about spilling water all over the place. I can put it in the boat, and it doesn't turn over, you know, on the way to the lake, because it's got a great base on it. It's got the little rubber pads on it. Doesn't slide around, blah, 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 all that good stuff, okay? So that's the bait cooler I use. Hope that helps you guys out when you're looking for a bait cooler. Keep in mind, you know, you may have to do something with the aerator on this one, but you may be blessed and get an aerator that never fails you. You know, I'm just telling you my experience. But I do wish they would upgrade that to something a little bit different. Maybe a little bit more dependable. But all in all, I give it an 8 out of 10. It's a great cooler, okay? So that's what I use. Hope that helps you guys out. We're going to take that cooler, these rods, this setup here. Next week, we're going to go to the lake. We're going to try to catch some fish on a minnow. I'm going to try to video the best that I can. There's an art to a crappie bite on a minnow with a float. There's an art on when to set that hook to hook up, to increase your hookup percentages. I'm going to try to get that on video for you guys next week. It's going to be really cool trying to get it on video, because right now the fish are deep, which is going to help me, because with those deep fish I can find some structure and I can get down there with a slip float and maybe show you guys that bite. And it's going to be really cool next week. So stay tuned. I appreciate it. Don't forget, hit that like, hit that subscribe button. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you're not a subscriber already. We appreciate everything you guys do for the channel. And as always, God bless. We'll catch you guys on the next one.